Okay, now look at question number 27. The diagram shows part of a river into which sewage is being pumped. Some of the effect of adding sewage to the river are shown in the graph. At which point in the river are decomposer most active? So as the sewage is pumped just before D, so at which point in the graph the decomposers are more active? As we can see over here at B, the concentration of bacteria are more. So what are decomposers? Decomposers are bacteria and fungi. So therefore at point B the decomposers will be more active, because at point B again the nitrate concentration is more, because the decomposer will break down the organic compounds and release nitrate ions. Now next, which statement correctly describe the factors that are passed on in an ecosystem? Carbohydrate are passed from decomposer to producer. No, it is passed on from producer to further in the trophic level. Now energy is passed from secondary consumer to primary consumer. Wrong. Energy is passed from primary consumer to secondary consumer. Proteins are passed from primary consumer to secondary consumer, not to producer. Water is passed from respiring decomposer to producer, because we know that when the decomposer it respires, it releases carbon dioxide and water, and the producer will then absorb water from the soil. Therefore, D is the correct answer. Now, look at question number 29. The diagram shows a pyramid of number in an ecosystem. In which group of organisms are the individual largest? So, for example, D is a tree. So, and on the tree, they are located caterpillar. The caterpillar are larger than trees, or tree is larger than caterpillar? Of course, tree is larger than the caterpillar. And then on the caterpillar, small birds can feed. The birds are larger than tree, or what? And on the bird, the big bird can feed upon. So always again the tree is larger. Therefore, in which group of organism are the individual largest? So D is the correct answer. Now next, in the nitrogen cycle, which conversion process can be carried out by animal, by bacteria and by plants? Now, nitrate to amino acid is done by animals. Okay, protein to nitrogen gas. Uh, Protein to nitrogen gas is done by bacteria, and nitrite to nitrate is done by plant. It is wrong, because um, a plant will not convert nitrite to nitrate. This conversion of nitrite to nitrate is done by nitrifying bacteria. Okay, and then the urea to protein is not done by animal. Protein to urea is done by animals. Okay, uh, and then this nitrate to amino acid is done by plants, not by animals. Okay, now nitrogen gas to ammonia, this conversion of nitrogen gas to ammonia is done by bacteria. Okay, fine, it is correct. But urea to protein is not done by animal. Protein to urea is done by animal. Therefore, B is also wrong. Now, protein to urea is done by animal. Okay, correct. And then nitrite to nitrate is done by bacteria. It is correct. And then plant will convert the nitrate to amino acid. Therefore, C is the correct answer. Now, next. Which stage of the life cycle of the malarial vector live in water? We know that we have just done it before. Larva and pupa, they live in water, whereas adult can live in bushes as well as on the surface of water. Therefore, B is the correct answer. Adult can live in dark corners of the houses as well. Now, the diagram represents gametes P and Q fuses to give cell R. Cell R then produces gamete S, T, U, and V. Cell R then produces gametes. So that means S, T, U, and V are also gamete, and P and Q are also gamete. Which statement about the number of chromosomes in the cells and gametes is correct? So the number of chromosomes in P and Q are different. Number of chromosomes in P and Q are different. No, they are same, because both of them are gamete. So if the P is containing 23 chromosome, then the Q is also containing 23 chromosome. And then next, um, Number of chromosomes in P and S are same, yes, as P is also gamete and S is also gamete. Therefore, number of chromosome in P and S are same. It's written over here. Cell R then produces gamete S, T, U, and B. So P and S both are gamete. Therefore, B is the correct answer. Now, in the experiment shown, each test tube contained mustard seeds on cotton wool. Which test tube should be compared to discover whether light is needed for the germination of these seeds? Now, one in which it is placed in the dark room. Therefore, it is an experimental group. It shows that light is essential for the germination of seed. Therefore, 1 is the correct answer. And then this 4, yes, light is provided as it is a control group. Therefore, it also shows that light is essential. Along with the damp cotton wool, all the necessary conditions are present to it act as a control group. So it shows that light is needed for the germination of seed. Therefore, A. But hold on. Now B. What B says, B is 2 and 4. In B, there is a dry cotton wool. So over here, the water is also removed along with the light. So in an experiment we can remove only one factor. Okay, now a liquid to absorb oxygen. So over here as well, both light as well as oxygen is absent. So this is again not an experiment for the importance of light, where the light is essential for photosynthesis or not. So only one is showing that. Therefore A is correct answer. Now next, the table shows the average pregnancy rate among couples using different method of contraception. What type of contraception is least reliable? Natural method. Natural method, rhythm method or natural method, both are the same thing. The average number of pregnancy per 1,000 couple per year is 125 over here. The rhythm method or natural method, both are the same. That's why natural method of pregnancy. Now the graph shows changes in a person's blood glucose concentration over 4 hours. What might cause the change at X and Y? As at X there is a fall in glucose concentration, so it must be because of insulin, and there is an increase in glucose concentration, so it must be because of adrenaline. The increase insulin cause fall in glucose concentration, and increase adrenaline will cause, because when the adrenaline concentration increase, there will be more conversion of glycogen to glucose molecule. Therefore D is the correct answer. A decrease in the number of producer in a food chain will cause decrease in a number of producer. So if the number of producers will decrease, then the consumer will increase in number? Of course not. Of course the consumer will also decrease in number. The more animals to migrate into the area irrelevant. The total productivity decrease in number की वजह से, why the productivity will decrease? The total biomass, the total productivity increase नहीं होगी, it will decrease. Now the total biomass will, now the total biomass to decrease, of course when there is an decrease in number of producer, then the biomass will also decrease. So if the producer's biomass will decrease, then of course we know that in each trophic level 90% of the biomass is lost through the process of respiration, excretion and digestion. Therefore D is the correct answer. The diagram shows a food web from an ecosystem. If the population of insect decrease, which other population will decrease the most? So let's see, where is the insect? So if the population of insect will decrease, so which other population will decrease the most? Let's look at badger. If the insect population will decrease, then the badger will feed upon the squirrel as well. Therefore its concentration will not be affected by the insect. Therefore badger is wrong. Lizard. If the population of insect will decrease, and as the lizard feed upon insect only, therefore the population of lizard will decrease. Okay. Sagebrush, देख लेते हैं. Sagebrush, insect feeds upon sagebrush. So if the population of insect will decrease, then the sagebrush population will increase. Now squirrels, कहाँ पे? Now squirrel has, if the population of insect will decrease, then the badger will feed more upon the squirrel. Badger will feed more upon, so it doesn't have a direct contact. Therefore the lizard is the most appropriate answer. Next, The diagram shows part of the carbon cycle, which numbered arrow represent respiration. We have already done this. It is B, Y, B, 1 and 4. Carbon compound in plant. When it respire, that is glucose. Carbon compound in plant is glucose, protein or fats, whatever it is. When it respire, then release carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So 1 is respiration, 2 is photosynthesis, and 3 is carbon compound is animal, and carbon compound in decomposer. So this is done by the death. And the carbon compound in decomposer release. So it is again a respiration. So what is the correct answer? 1 and 4 is the correct answer. Now next, new plant may be grown from group of cells that are taken from other plant. The diagram shows part of plant X from which structure will cell sample grow into new plant that are genetically identical to plant X. We know that genetically identical plants are formed by asexual reproduction or formed by mitosis. In A, the number of chromosomes are haploid. In B, as the pollen tube also rises from the pollen grain, therefore the number of chromosomes are also haploid. So haploid cannot develop into a genetically identical plant. For a plant to for any cell to form a genetically identical plant, it should have diploid number of chromosome. So which part contain diploid number of chromosome? Only D. Therefore receptacle is the correct answer. D is the correct answer. C again is ovule, and we know that ovule also contain haploid number of chromosome. Therefore D is the correct answer. In plant reproduction, the following processes occur: fertilization, growth of the pollen tube, pollination, seed germination. In which order do these processes takes place? So 1 is fertilization, 4 is seed germination. Of course not, wrong ho gaya. Now next is B is growth of a pollen tube. So of course first pollination, then growth of the pollen tube, and then fertilization, and then seed germination. Therefore C is the correct answer. Now next, the diagram shows the female reproductive system. In which part are the egg and zygote is formed? We know that egg is formed in the ovary. This is ovary. The egg is formed in the ovary, and zygote is formed in the oviduct. In the oviduct, the fertilization will occur. Therefore, the zygote is formed in the oviduct. So egg is formed at 2 and zygote is formed at 1. Therefore, C is the correct answer. Now next, the diagram shows the male reproductive and urinary system, which structure produces the fluid part of the semen. We know that fluid part of the semen is produced by C, and what is C? C is the prostate gland. Now next, 2009. The diagram shows the dorsal view of the central nervous system. Which structure are visible? This is now not included in our syllabus. Now next, the diagram shows part of a person's nervous system that has been cut at X. Cut at X. Now a bee sting finger, this is the same question. Now, what is an effect of insulin? Effect of insulin is decreased cell respiration, no. Decreased absorption of glucose by cells, no. Increased excretion of glucose, increased synthesis of glycogen. We know that. What is the role of insulin? Is to convert the glucose to glycogen. Okay, therefore it is the D is the correct answer. Now next, the diagram shows the human eye in section. There are circular muscles at X and Y. Okay, now what happened to the circular muscle at X and Y when the eye focuses on near object in bright light? We know that in bright light CCRR of iris muscle. Fine, so iris, what happened to the iris muscle in bright light? CC circular muscle will contract. So iris Y will X will contract, so S will contract. The A and B are the correct answer. And what happened to the muscle at Y? Near object,